Alright, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Just a quick review of the, the alphabet to start. Should be practicing on your glottal stops. Make sure you're getting those stops in there. Stress, the same thing. You know, practice trying to say the stress on the other half of the word and see how weird it sounds. We want to make sure we're practicing the difference between ah, like as in paw hop, and as in lapit. We want to try to hang on to those distinctions. The AWs and AYs, we went over those already. The C sound makes a tsa. When we emphasize it with the glottal sound, we get a tsa. So we'll see that a few different times. H is just like English. I makes I until it gets lengthened, then it becomes E. K makes a k sound. We want to practice the difference between K and Q. So K is k and Q is ko. So practice on those a little bit. Again, the barred L is a sh sound. Your creaking consonants, the M and the N. O, your lips should be making an O shape. It gets long, it becomes yos, like yos. We just talked about the Q. S is like English. T. U is sort of a sound, and then it becomes a oo sound when it gets long. So you have kuts and nu. The X sound is one that we don't have in English a lot, and that's so there's a difference between H, which is and X, which is and the glottalized X, which is the only one that appears with a dot underneath it. So you have H, X, and the glottalized X, which is okay. So we're going to keep practice on those. Alphabet thing is probably going to drop off after this one. If you need extra help with that, comment on the live, or you can message me directly. We can talk about it a little bit more. But we've reviewed it in every lesson so far, so we probably won't review it again. Next, let's talk about the dictionary a little bit. In the dictionary, first 25 pages is the preface, which goes over, it goes over the alphabet too. You can see all the same symbols there. It talks a little bit about dialects. It has all of the abbreviations for the entries. Basically tells you how to use the dictionary. Okay, so page 1 to page 25, that's what the dictionary does. You get to page 25, you start seeing the entries. The entries in this case are almost all Indian to English, so that's a majority of the 1,400 pages that the dictionary is all Indian to English, and that's because it gives us a lot of examples. It talks about parts of speech. It helps us understand about verb conjugation. So that's kind of what we're building our lesson around, is the dictionary, so that you can have access to this material all the time. If this is your first class and you don't have access to the material, the very first comment in the live is a link to my Dropbox, which will give you a PDX version of the Nez Perce Dictionary for free. So you just go to the Dropbox, download it right to your phone. If you're using an iPhone, you open that thing in Books, and you'll have the Nez Perce Dictionary with you wherever you go. Okay, and really the only difference between the two is the long A sound is reflected here by the A with the accent on it, and then this little dot suggests that there's two A's there and not just one. So that's how you know it's a long sound. So I can give you an example here. So instead of Oops. This one looks like this in the Nez Perce alphabet book, and then it'll look like gosh dang it. Give me just a second. That one. And not you either. There it is. So it looks like this in our Nez Perce alphabet book, and then it looks like this in the dictionary. That's really the only difference between the two in the way that things are spelled. If you go all the way to the end of the dictionary, then that's where we start the English to Indian translations, and that's on page 5 million, it feels like sometimes. 1,000. So on page 1124 is where the English to Nez Perce dictionary starts. It talks briefly about some of the symbols that you'll see in there, and that goes into the English to Nez Perce translations. Okay. So what happens in here is you think of whatever it is you're trying to say in English, and then you look it up in English, and it'll give you a translation in Indian. And then in Indian, when you look it up here, it's going to give you a bunch of different translations. And so what we've been focusing on is trying to identify what the root word is. So usually it'll give you a root word right away. But you want to kind of read through them a little bit. Accidental slip, mistake's going to give you a different root word than it does to be in an accident. So then you would look up this word in the dictionary, starting with the W, and it'll give you all the different translations. Use them in sentences and examples, and tell you most of what you need to know about how to use that word. Okay, so that's sort of what this class is centered around, is giving you the tools so that you can study these sort of words on your own. So you have the dictionary on your phone. You should be thinking about it regularly throughout the day. How do you say ability? Oh, something pops into your head that has to do with the word ability, and then you go to ability, look it up in the dictionary, and then you just explore it for just a few seconds. You don't have to spend a whole bunch of time there, but because it popped in your head, and because you're feeling like you're wondering what that word is in Indian, then that's kind of what piques your interest, right? And so when you look that word up because you're interested in it, because it has some effect on whatever it is you're doing, you'll have a better tendency to remember that. And we talked about that a little bit in the last two classes, is what's your motivation for wanting to learn the language? Because whatever your motivation is for wanting to learn the language, that's what's going to help you remember things. Anybody can look stuff up in the book, right? But how well will you remember it? And that's what my grandpa really struggled with. We would go over the same words every week, and we're only there for an hour a week. And then when you come back the next week, how many times did you actually use it? How much do you actually remember? And so having the dictionary on your phone gives you almost an unfair advantage to look things up. If you were studying Spanish and you were to go to Spain or to Mexico or somewhere, you'd want to have some kind of translation document with you, so that if you need to know how to go to the bathroom or whatever, you can look these things up. And so that's basically what we're doing, is giving you the ability to navigate this dictionary to help you say the things that you feel like you should be saying in the language. So if you have kids, you're looking up the word more, and you're looking up the words for do you have to go to the bathroom, and are you hungry, and get in the car, and get your darn shoes on, stuff like that. So that's why it's important to have it on your phone. So I want you to download it on your phone. If you have problems with that, you let me know. I'll help you figure it out. Okay, so then once you go to these words, what starts to happen is it's giving you all these examples, and you're trying to unpack everything that's happening, right? So we've been using the example for accident. So when you look up accident in the dictionary, this took me forever last time, and I'm on the wrong page already because I was trying to set us up for something else. Bookmarker or something. So when you get on the right page, in the W section, so much easier in books, but for whatever reason this machine doesn't like it. Take a math class or something. There we go. So when you look up the word for accident, weauk is the root word. It gives you all these different examples. So what we've been working on is explaining how this root word changes to get all of these different interpretations of what happens. And that's what we call verb conjugation. Verb is to do something, any kind of to do something. And so when you're using a verb, you need to know aspect, who is doing the doing, and then tense, when are they doing it. So you look up the very first one there, it gives you weauka, I am hurt, and then weauchna, I got hurt, past tense. Starts introducing nouns like now lakaika is how we say car. And it gives you this W with a period, and that's just referencing this example that it gave right above itself. So this W here represents this one. Same with these W's represent that one. It starts to go on and represent other ones. So this W here represents this example. And so on and so forth. And then it starts going into all the things that you can do with it. And what it's doing is adding on things onto the end of weauk. When we add stuff on the end, it's a suffix. And then it also shows us how to add things onto the beginning. This is what we call a prefix. And so that's kind of what we've been working on. But it's a great way to just kind of expose yourself to the language. And you should be doing that multiple times a day. If you just listen to me talk for an hour, it's going to take you a really long time to learn the language. And if that's all you have, that's fine. I'm just saying, if you wanted to grab an extra hour somewhere along the way, you could do it all by yourself without having to get on, set aside time, 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock on Mondays and Wednesdays. You could just do it on your own. And so I'm giving you the tools to that. That's what the alphabet does. The alphabet gives us the ability to repeat this word exactly the way it should be said. So the W just like English, I, Y just like English. The A makes the ah sound. It's elongated because you can tell it has a dot next to it. Has an accent over the A. That's the emphasis of the word. We want to make sure we're putting the right emphasis so we don't get it on the wrong syllable, right? So it's and then W again, and then we know Q makes the cough sound, so it's giving us the correct pronunciation, it's giving us the correct stress, and it'll always be the same. It won't change like English does, where you have to memorize multiple different ways to say the same vowel. It'll always be the same. And then it gives us these examples, and then if we understand how to put prefixes and suffixes on there, then we can use these along with the other nouns and adjectives and things that we memorize. Okay, and that's what this document here does, is it walks us through what those prefixes are. So we're going to go over them pretty quickly, and then we're going to introduce a little bit more on these because it just goes on forever. This document here is in the Dropbox. It talks about a bunch of different ways that you can put prefixes and suffixes on verbs and how that changes them. And if you can understand that, concept, it's not that different. It's not that different from, say, I was just using this example a little bit ago, and I was talking to somebody about all of this. It's not that different from what we do in English. Like, for example, give a great example in the front of the dictionary. Anti-establishmentarianism. Okay, the word anti-establishmentarianism is an English word, and there's all kinds of things that we're putting on the front, like anti and dis are prefixes, and then there's more, and then there's stuff that follows the stem, which is establishment, antarianism, and when we talk in English, those things make sense to us, but we're doing the same thing in Indian. We're putting stuff on the front and stuff on the back, and it helps us change the meaning a little bit. And that's important because in Nez Perce we don't have, we do more of that. Almost everything is done that way in Nez Perce, rather than all the other different ways that we do things when we're talking about stuff in English. So let's pull the prefix document up. Here, the very first prefix that we have is, there's no prefix. So the verb to go in is oughts, and you can see that there's nothing on the front. It just starts right with the verb. So when we do that, we're in first person or second person. So that's I or you. And then we put a simple tense on the end, and then we're making a sentence just by saying oughta is the equivalent of I went in, which takes 3 different words to do in English. So the first pronominal prefix is that there isn't one. And then the second one is skip it. So the second one that I want you to understand is the prefix he. And this prefix he changes the verb to third person. So we're talking about somebody over there. Now in Nez Perce, we don't care whether it's a he, she, or an it. So there's not gender specific. You can use he if you're talking about a woman. You can also use he if you're talking about a hammer or an animal of some kind. We don't distinguish that in Nez Perce. Now, if you want to emphasize it, you'd say he plus your verb plus your tense, and then you would emphasize it by saying the girl or the man or the horse or or whatever, the car. Then you could emphasize what your deal is, what it is what you're talking about, but you don't necessarily need it. Okay, so you put the he on there. That makes it third person. We're talking about somebody over there. So if you can understand those two, which is what we worked on last week, And we're going to introduce a little bit more this week, talking about more than one person or pluralizing it. We want to make sure people understand how to do that first. So first person, second person, and third person. Then we have simple tense. So on the end of the word, there's a couple suffixes that we can add that say we did it in the past tense or that we're doing it in the future. So if we put an E on the end, we're doing it in the past tense. If we put a U on the end, we're doing it in the future. If you can get those three things together, then you can make a sentence. Aspect, verb, tense. Bob went home. That's the simplest way to make a sentence. It's very C-spot run type stuff, but that's where we're at. We're just learning, right? If you think about the way a baby or early elementary kid talks, that's the kind of stuff. That's the way their books are written, right? So if you can understand those things, then we can start introducing other stuff. And so we can talk about plurals and get more complicated with our conjugations. But first, we just need to realize that the way that we communicate points is a lot like that word. Anti-establishmentarianism is doing the same thing. It's adding stuff on the front and on the back to change the meaning of the verb or the word. Now, the other thing that we went over last week are two more concepts that make learning Nez Perce a little more complicated. The first one was vowel harmony. So when we put that E on the end of a word that has a soft vowel harmony or a weak vowel harmony, it just stays an E. So pin, meek, the I's can be considered strong or E or weak. So it can just stay with the weak, pin, mika. But ata, because it inherently has those A's in the front, it's going to become a strong vowel. So that E is going to change to an ah, so that all of the vowels in our word match. Okay. Same thing when we put the U on the end. We put the U on the end of a verb that has soft vowels. The U stays a U, but when we put it on the end of a verb that has strong vowels, it changes to a strong vowel and becomes a O. So ato, I will go out. So it's the same thing. If you break it into pieces, the way that we have here, and you put the U on the end of the ot, so it would look like this thing's just giving me problems tonight. So it would look like this. We'd have the glottal stop in the front. Which looks like this. We have the A with the accent. We have another A. We have the T. So that's our root word. And then on the end of that, we would put our U with the glottal stop. Oops. So with these with these slashes around it, this is what it would look like unchanged. And then when we put it all together, so if we're going to do that combination, then in our mind it would change to the same thing. But this is going to become an O because it's strong vowels. And then once it changes, we can get rid of the dash. And then it looks like that. Just like the example it gave us here. Killing me tonight, Streamlabs. Killing me. Right there. Just like the example it gives us there. So it becomes auto. Right? Trying to get fancy, messing myself up. Give me that one anymore. Anyway. What is that about? Like it gives us in the example here, auto. So if you can wrap your head around the prefixes, the suffixes, the vowel harmony, then we can start working on the other parts. So I have all these other rules that we can work on, but first we really need to wrap our brains around, what's happening, and not just for the sake of what's happening in the just for the idea of this document, but it helps us understand what's happening in the dictionary. So there's a lot of stuff going on, like we talked about with this. When we start looking at all these examples, it can be a little overwhelming. But if we can break it down into these pieces where we're saying we have this root word with the prefix and the suffix on there, it'll allow us to think of it as taking something and putting an exponent on it. So if you have the number 2 and then you put an exponent on there, that's essentially what learning the system does. Is it allows you to, okay, so now I understand the system works. If I start intermixing all these pieces, then it multiplies what I can say by exponentially, so by 2 or by 3 or by 4, without having to memorize a whole bunch of other stuff. So I wanted to cover that. So we got no prefix. The he tells us third person, and then the suffixes we just put the e on the end. And that gives us past tense, and then we put the u on the front, and that gives us future tense. So with that, any verb that you memorize now, you can multiply by 1, 2, 3, 4. It becomes to the exponent of 4 the number of sentences that you can make if you can understand those concepts. And that's sort of what we were getting at when I posted something in the group chat, was that I'll put something in the group chat that's very simple. You go look it up in the dictionary and see what you can find in there. And if you can find the exact one, it'll tell you exactly what the translation is. And so you can use that as a way to gain exposure to the language. Okay, so when you look it up, you're already deciphering what's happening in there. A and O are strong. We have a question from Janine. A and O are strong vowels. That's correct. And I is not. So I is somewhere in the middle. So I can be either strong or weak. But the E and the U are not strong vowels. So I is somewhere in the middle. Sometimes you'll see it with the strong ones. Sometimes you'll see it with the weak ones. But A and O are for sure strong, and E and U are the weak ones. And it gives us good examples right here. Pinmika. Well, I'll show you how the dictionary will give you some clues. If you have a word like pinmeek, where it's just all I's, and you're trying to figure out whether it's going to be strong or weak, because sometimes the dictionary will tell you. It'll say, all right, there's this word, and it'll put it right in there that it's a strong vowel or a weak vowel word. And it'll do the same thing with the prefixes and the suffixes. Sometimes if you have a word that's inherently weak in its root word and you put a suffix on there that's inherently strong, then what happens with the two? And the dictionary can help you sort those things out. But as long as you're understanding the concept, the dictionary will be a big help with that. But that's a great question. Yeah, I can be either, and the dictionary can help you sort that out, or the teachers can help you sort it out, or your elders can help you sort it out. Okay, so if you can understand aspect, the who, tense, the when, you can understand the vowel harmony. The last thing that's super, super important is your verb class. So some of the verb classes are going to be what we call C class and what we call S class. And and that's what changes the most notably the progressive tense. So I'm going to introduce the idea of progressive tense here, and then we're going to use that as a way to cover the idea of S verbs and C verbs. So when we use progressive, would be the same as the ing, right? So if you're playing, would be the same as the sa. I'm going out. I'm going to sleep. Okay, that's the equivalent of ing. And you can see how pinmeek ends with sa. That means that it's a S verb. But wihnitsa, because its root word ends with an N, okay, it's stem. They call it a stem word here, but it's the same thing. If you look up go in the dictionary, it would be WIHN. And then because it ends with an N, that's going to change the C, the S that we would normally put on there to a C. So you wouldn't say wihnsa, wihnsa. It just kind of blends them together, so it becomes wihnitsa. So like here's a good example. The root word for arrive is pine. Because it ends in this N, we know that it's a C verb, because when N and S occur together, they change to C. So the conjugation for I am arriving is paitsa. Misa. This one doesn't end in an N, so the S will stay. And the dictionary will tell you that. It'll show you when you look up a word. Weauk, it's going to be C. So when you put it, when you start anywhere that the N and the S will occur together, it's going to change to a C. See, it changed to a C there. This one's a C verb too. And the dictionary will tell you in the front what all these symbols mean. It tells you what the VC means. It tells you what the AW means. It gives you everything to unpack these. And then this one is an S verb. So when we add the SE on the end, because there's no N at the very end, there's N there, but then we have this vowel. So when we add the SE on the end, because there's no NS direct combination where the N and the S are touching, the S is allowed to stay. So those are the big four. If you can understand those four concepts, 70% of the dictionary is going to make sense to you. That's 70% of the way of being able to just say whatever it is you want to say. As long as you know what your verb is, you know how to make your who, you know how to make your when, you can do the vowel harmony, and you can do the S. So and you know which verbs are S verbs and C verbs. You're going to be a long way into the language. Okay, and so to me this beats just trying to memorize every one of these words. All I have to do now is memorize prefixes and the suffixes. I can memorize the root word, and then I'm multiplying what I'm able to say exponentially. You can learn, nouns, and now I'm able to make my sentences even longer and communicate what I really want to say even more accurately. I know it's kind of a hard concept, but if you can get the idea of where these two pieces intersect and change to something else, it happens with some other stuff too. When you have a Q on the end of the word, it'll turn into an X. When you have an H in certain situations, the H will just disappear. When you have sometimes I's get inserted when you have certain consonants getting together, and those are all concepts that will develop you as a speaker. But understanding the difference between the S verbs and the C verbs, if you can understand that concept, then when we start introducing all these other rules that are similar, it's not as difficult. So that's what I want you to focus on, is understanding the idea or the concept of those two consonants occurring together, and then when we put them together like a couple of building blocks, it creates a change, and we have to memorize that change. That's why I don't want you to just memorize all of these sentences. I'd rather have you memorize the system. It makes it so much easier. Okay, I know that was a difficult concept. If you're having trouble with it, we'll go over it again next week for sure. We went over it a little bit last week, but you kind of have to hear these things a few times for it to really sort of sit in there. And I've heard, I don't have a whole lot of experience with it, but I've heard that the Cayuse dialect doesn't do a whole lot of vowel harmony. Maybe Kristen could weigh in on that, or one of the other Cayuse Nez Perce speakers could weigh in on that. So if they say it's okay that you don't have to do vowel harmony, that makes it a little bit easier. But I sort of like all these little pieces that make our language, rich and unique, and that's really how linguistics was born. It was actually in big part to a Nez Perce man named Archie Finney, and he could speak both Nez Perce and English. And in trying to document his mom and his language, he figured out that Nez Perce is incredibly rich in all these little pieces that you have to understand. So he went on to be called the father of modern day linguistics. He went to Siberia and helped people over there document disappearing languages. And it's because our language is so rich in all these little pieces that we have in common with the other languages across the world, that he was able to do that. And so I don't have the option. The way that I learned it was with vowel harmony, and sometimes it'll trip me up a little bit if somebody's speaking to me in Indian and not using the vowel harmony. So that's just where I'm at with it. But it's up to who your teacher is. I actually pinned. I put in the comment section, I pinned the Dropbox, and then right beneath that I put in a link to attend Kristen's class, Kristen Parr's class, if you want to attend it. She teaches Cayuse Nez Perce every Tuesday at noon. So you can copy and paste this link here, and you can follow it. It'll take you to her class, so you can take it, and she'll be the authority on whether or not you have to use vowel harmony, if that's the way you're going to go, if you're going to go with the Cayuse dialect. But for us, for the purposes of this class, I really want you to understand those four concepts. I want you to understand the vowel harmony that's in there, and I also want you to understand the difference between S verbs and C verbs, which I'm sure they have in the Cayuse dialect as well. So let's take the last few minutes here and talk about the group chat. For those of you who are in the group chat, we did our first exercise in there. I picked a word out of just randomly out of the dictionary, and it sparked some cool stuff that happened. So I want to go over that. So I just turned to a page and just picked out a fully conjugated verb in the language. And that was the verb for to be awake, wachwi. So let's find that one in the dictionary. It's right here. The bottom. Oops. Man, I need to take a math class. Just adding 25 to these things is killing me. There it is, right there. Wachwi, to be awake. And this was the one that I picked right here, wachwisa. And the assignment was for somebody to just come up with a translation, simple translation. And this is what I was looking for here, somebody to say, I am awake. So you can see we have the verb stem here, wachwi. It shows us where the stress might be. And then we put the present tense on there for doing it right now. And what we end up with is wachwisa. Okay, so that's all I was really asking you to do. I got to give a shout out to Lewis for being an overachiever. When he messaged me directly, that was all that he gave, but he tried to put it in a sentence for the group chat. And I thought that was really cool too, but what happened right away was when I seen that wachwi, my eyebrows went up right away. To be awake, that's not how I normally say it. Like, right away made me question myself. And then I seen this part right here. And what this CF means, I had a little trouble remembering it. I had to ask Kristen for a little bit of help. But I couldn't remember the discussion. But I remember when I seen the CF that it meant something similar to see also. And I recognize this root word right here, walk. Like, oh yeah, so that's how I would say it. So then I went to walk in the dictionary, which is just a couple pages back. A little bit more. Right there. And it has a few examples in there that all mean something different. So this was the one I was thinking of, walk, but it can also mean to be alive. Walk es would be like when we're talking about someone's life. Okay. Yeah, good job, Melinda. Yeah, Andrea, good. Yeah, there's no grade here, no pressure, anything like that. All I'm trying to do is, give you guys the tools to be able to do this stuff on your own, so that when you feel like doing it, after you got the kids to bed and dinner's made and all that stuff, you don't need to be here at 7 or 8. You can just look it up. So we have walk. This A right here gives us a different part of speech. I'm not going to go into all of that, but here is what I was thinking of, and it turns out it's a similar word. It's very similar. I talked a little bit about a Q being on the end, and it'll spiralize into an X, and that's sort of what was happening in the dictionary. So it's kind of a cool coincidence there that I sort of went, oh, that doesn't. Yeah, well, I guess and then after a little bit of investigation, like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, no, that's right. That's how it would work. It would make sense that way. So that was the first coincidence that I thought was pretty cool. And then Lewis used it in a way where he was trying to make a sentence, and he used a word that had the root word in it, hikai. Or for cut or cup or plate, which is hikai. Did anybody make it that far? See if I can find the right spot here. And at first I thought he was saying Noctim Kai, which is like, oh, it only takes me one cup of coffee and then I'm awake. And so I was going to, sort of help him navigate that. But I checked with him first, and he sent me a screenshot of the word, and I went, oh. And then we looked at it in the dictionary. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's one of the rules that H can disappear. I mentioned that just a few minutes ago. That H can disappear, and that if you put it with Nox in Hikai, they join together, and it means one cup. Come on, Jess, you gotta get better at this, dude. But interestingly enough, it was listed in the dictionary under Nox, I think. Let's see if I can find it here real quick. Oh no, it was listed under Hikai, so I thought, it's so Hikai. Yeah, 140 plus 25 is going to be 165, right? If I go right to 165, am I going to get it right this time? Or my math's still terrible. 165. It's actually 164. I should be adding 24, I guess. And there it is right there. Knock, tsi, kai. Knock, tsi, kai. Loch, a cup of coffee. Could he have put a couple more things in there that would have made it, a little more clear about what he was trying to say? Maybe. Was it fine the way that it was? Yeah, it just kind of threw me off a little bit. That's one of the reasons why we're having the class, is that got to practice, being in those situations. And so I thought that was cool. I thought that was a cool, almost a perfect demonstration without even meaning to, of coming across the word listed in the dictionary as wahiwa, and then it said see also walk, which you looked up in walk, and they're sort of the same thing, but it gives some different examples, a little bit different way that it's used. And then Lewis looking up a cup of coffee or a cup somehow. He probably started in the English section for cup, and it led him here. Boom, there it is right there, a cup of coffee. It goes perfect with what I'm trying to say as far as wahuisa. And there you go. It was born. He put in the word Mewi, I think, which actually breaks apart into some different pieces too. If you look up the prefix May, MEEY, it talks about stuff happening in the morning. So you can put my on the front of other things and imply that it's happening in the morning. It doesn't just have to be we, which I thought was which is another cool way. And so that's what I mean. You're looking through the dictionary. You're coming across all these ways. You're learning different ways to say different things. So it's it doesn't feel just like a static situation. Mayui is always going to mean morning. There's lots of different ways to put those pieces together to say different things and give emphasis on different things. So I thought that was really cool, man. So Lewis won $5, so I'm gonna buy him a cup of coffee. But that's sort of the way that I want you guys to learn the group chat. So, or use the group chat rather, when you're spending a few times during the day or whatever thinking about how would you say that in the language. I want you to be able to look those things up in the dictionary, and there's a bunch of different ways that you can use it. And so by just trying to use it, you're not only challenging yourself to learn the words and to expose yourself to the language, having that connection to the language. You're also challenging all of us, like, oh, okay, I wonder what is it he or she is trying to say there. And so by you going through the dictionary, you're also exposing yourself to the language, and you're trying different things. And then when you look it up, maybe you could even be looking at the word next to it, and you're like, oh, you know what, I was wondering how you would say that, and now you're off onto something else. Maybe that's more important. It's more meaningful to you than whatever it is that we're working on in the group chat. And then it's that right there. All of a sudden, oh, I was wondering how you would say that. Boom! Now that word is in your brain and you remember it. And that's the way that we are sometimes. How do you remember your phone number? Or how do you remember, funny lines from a movie? It's because somehow it spoke to you in a way that, it attached yourself, attached itself to you. And now you have it, and you'll never forget that. It just sticks with you all the time. Oh yeah, I mean that's a good way to try it out. Janine in the group chat, she put my Noktsikai Lauch. That would be like saying the one morning cup of coffee. To me that would be like if you were just trying to say that, that's, I'm limiting myself to just one, as if you'd been drinking 15 cups of coffee or whatever. The one morning cup of coffee, that's what the Nox is. There. But yeah, just like that, you can experiment around with that. Let's look it up. Let's look up and see what all you could attach May to. Goes hunting early, gets up early, returning home in the morning, your morning cup of coffee. I feel like adding May on there maybe is a little more complicated translation than most of us would be used to. But in this situation, it makes absolute sense. You could try it out. And that's where the elders really become more valuable. That's how we figured all this stuff out. Is like, okay, well, yeah, so we have my, which talks about doing things in the morning. We have Noksikai. We have Lo. Could you say this? And they, having the instinct of knowing that kind of stuff, would be like, I'm not really sure that makes sense. To me, it makes sense in the context of what we're doing. I might not pick it up right away. If you just said that to me, maybe now that we've been through this exercise. But that's exactly, Janine, that's exactly the kind of thing that I'm asking you to do is look up these things and try these things out. And the more you do it, the easier it'll get, the more stuff that sticks in your brain. Okay, so we'll do the same thing. I'll put something else in the group chat, and then we'll all kind of work on it together, and then we'll come back next week. There's only going to be 3 more classes after this, so we won't have class on Christmas Day, but we'll have class again on next Monday and Wednesday. Then we'll skip Christmas Day, and then our last class will be the Wednesday after Christmas. If you guys want to keep going beyond that, with some more complicated stuff, let us know. Otherwise, we're just going to kind of go forward with using the group chat and exercising our language skills this way, and then, maybe going forward we go with a more complicated class. But next week we'll talk a little bit more about pluralizing things, maybe add in a few more prefixes and suffixes, and then we'll kind of build on that a little bit more. But like I said, if you can get these concepts down, maybe with a few more prefixes and suffixes, you should be able to say, hundreds of things and communicate in a bunch of different ways just by knowing the root words and maybe some nouns or adjectives or something. You'll be able to get a long ways by just understanding those concepts. So if you get a chance to take Kristen's class, go ahead and do it. Also, shout out to Lee Gavin. I seen he posted some artwork that had language that he learned, from the class over the top of his artwork, and I thought that was really cool. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. You use it in our everyday lives, and even mix your English in with it. It's not that big of a deal. I hear Leslie do that a lot. She'll be talking in Indian, and then she'll mix a little bit of English in there, and that's great. If you know the words in Indian and you're trying to communicate something and it just feels easier to say it in English, say it in English. That's steps above just saying things in English. Okay, so we're going to keep practicing that, and then we're going to build on a few more prefixes and suffixes, keep exercising our work with the dictionary, and ultimately get to where we can compose good sentences on our own, put it in the group chat, bounce things back and forth off each other, and increase our fluency in the language. All right? So I'll see you guys next week. Thanks everybody for coming.